Here's a lecture from all the Afrocentrics and the Kemetans and the proud Africans, Afrocentric, the RBG community, including the false flaggers. Where are all their videos and lectures that tell you the truth about Osiris? When did they tell you that he was an Ethiopian? They don't. Ethiopia is the missing link in African history. Sterling M. Means, back in the 20s and 30s, did a book of the same title, Ethiopia, the missing link. It was the missing link in African history, right? It was a missing link. It could be called the missing key, but it's definitely the missing link in African history. Now, I do this video because there's a lot of ones that we don't have standing when it really comes to certain things that they are seeking to dismiss or seeking to slander, such as the King of Kings, Haile Selassie I. And I'm speaking of those black Hebrews and Israelites, as well as the false flaggers among the RBG community, and some abbreviated and deviated Rastas, those who like to abbreviate the glory, say Rasta, and talk about, well, Rasta means, what they say, Rasta means the head creator. And see, if they learned Amharic, they'll recognize that Fetari is not Teferi. Teferi is not Fetari. You know, remind me of some of the Bingi out here when we were teaching the Amharic at the Ayabingi, Nyabingi, the Sabbath school. And they was talking about Farai, you know, like say Farai, right? And you hear some of the chants, and we overstand that. Just because ones don't know, that's an ignorance, so be it. They can be forgiven for their ignorance. But once one shines a light and says it's not Farai or Ferri, which means coward, but Teferi, the one who is to be respected, the one who is to be honored and even feared in the sense of reverential trust and a hatred of what is evil, right? But anyway, that being that, let's touch on Osar and Oset, ancient Ethiopians, or should we say ancient Tobians. If we talk about Tob and Tobia, we're probably getting a little bit ahead of ourselves right there. We just have to, first of all, maybe we should just say Osiris, right, and Isis, because most people know Osiris and Isis. But the RBG community and the Kemites and the Egyptians, you know, the Kemetians, they'll tell you, no, that's the Greek, that's the Europeans, right? But what's the root? What's the real roots of ancient Egypt? Right? What's the real roots of ancient Egypt? Ask them, what's the roots? That civilization that we call ancient Kemet, what is its roots? What does Kemet say of itself? From where did the Kemetian, if we want to call it, or the ancient Egyptian civilization spring from? Well, it's all connected with the story of Isis, right, and Osiris. And we'll use this right here for Isis and Osiris. It's not a historical pick right there. You know, we can basically touch on some of the historical picks. Let's touch on some of the historical picks. This is one of the historical picks right here, right? Clearly, we see that Osiris, right? We can look at the features. He is what they would call, and what people call today, a black man. Here's a little close-up right here, right? Here's a close-up. Now, they say, well, this is a large statue of Osar, a.k.a. Aka, Osiris, from the late period that they had found, right? So they said this is later period. This is the Potomac period. They allege 332 to 330 BC. And that means like about 330 years before the Common Era and before the birth of Yeshua HaMashiach. But see, a lot of these same Kemites, right, or Kemetians and Afrocentrics and RBG false flaggers, they will say that, well, Christ never existed. That's what they'll tell you. They're not saying the white Jesus, Caesar Borgia, is a fraud. And they'll tell you that a little bit. They say, even though, right, some say that he was black, he never existed. So see, that's that cognitive dissonance. See, so cognitive dissonance has even crept into the, quote, conscious, end quote, community. But what are they conscious of? I mean, a dog is conscious as a dog, and a cat is conscious as a cat, right? Unless it's having some, so what? A dog is conscious of being a dog, or a cat is a cat. But what they're not conscious of, right, is the real roots of the ancient Egyptian civilization, right? So here, we're actually getting a little bit ahead of yourselves right here, but we're just showing you the link, how it began in Ethiopia, right? And it will end in Ethiopia, right? Or with Ethiopians, right? It will end. It began with Ethiopians and it will end with Ethiopians as it was in the beginning, right? That's why the man said, who also was an Ethiopian too, the man who said, as it was in the beginning, so shall it be in the end. Here we have a more historical, right? For those who will say, we want to see the real art and facts. We want the peer review. We want this to be reviewed by the European scholarship. Because they'll try to tell us that when we talk about Ethiopia, we talk about ancient artifacts, about ancient scriptures, about the Kibber Neges. We talk about the Metzhafa Hanok, the book of Enoch. We talk about the Metzhafa Iyol, the Metzhafa Adam Wehewan, the book of Adam and Eve, the book of Jubilees. They'll say, well, that's a narrative. You see, we want to see the original manuscripts. Even if you saw the original manuscripts, can you read them? Since already what you get even of the Kemite culture comes through the spectacles, right, of the same Goy, the same Goyim. So they want to play this kind of a game with I, as I is rising up in the Black Messiah consciousness, and we're bringing these facts and we're tying it together. Say, oh, but Moses never existed, because how could he write about his own death? Right? And write about things before him. Well, how could people write books about other periods in time too? Right? They go to the library, they go to school, they learn things. And it says Moses was learned in all the wisdom or the mysteries of the Egyptians, of the Egypts, and he was mighty in word and deed. But it said, no, that's a byproduct. The Pope wrote that. So they would give the power to the European, and they'll say the Bible was plagiarized. Oh, the Bible was plagiarized. When was the Bible plagiarized? You know why that argument falls on its face? Because if they were to go to the root, and this brings us, let's try to, progress, get off the digress that we've gone through, because it's a little rant here. Because there's a lot of little points, like the point about the Bible being plagiarized, that probably needs to be addressed in its own vid, right? In its own vid. Why that is such a faulty argument, but it's understandable since they can't go beyond the reasoning, right, of the Gentile, of their Western Gentile minds, since they haven't really gone to the root. And I'm not talking about, because some folks will say, I've been to Ethiopia. Have you been there? And then people are like, oh, we've been to Ethiopia. Yeah. But, we read and study the language. Do you? You know what I mean? And that's the root of it. Education is the key. It didn't say travel is the key. Right? It said education is the key. Then you'll know where to travel and how to have get the best out of your travel dollars. But the real root of the ancient Egyptian civilization, here we go right here, right? This is an Afro-Asiatic map, Shemitic, Amharic, Ethiopic. You see, a lot of this labrish, leflafi, negaroch, would basically end once we get to the root, right? Once we get a proper orientation on where was and where is the root of the ancient Kemite culture, right? Because some of the consciousness, the black consciousness folks, they will dismiss, Haile Selassie. They will seek to dismiss the testimony of the Rastafari. They'll dismiss, and we've actually seen it. You can see there's this video out there on Sanetta TV where he's interviewing Sankofa. And I'd like you to check that out. Sanetta TV 7, the number 7, the cipher, the number 7. Sanetta TV 7. and he has an interview with an ex-Hebrew. I think it's Sankofa exposes ancient Hebrews, right, is the name. And then after that, go check out Saraswati Seti's video where he exposes Sa-Netta. But anyway, not to get into all of that, what we want you to do is to get into this, because we need to get reorientated, right? So the origin of the ancient Kemite or Kamawian Sultane or civilization, as you say in your Goy English, right, is Ethiopia. The ancient Egyptians, the ancient Kemites themselves have testified to it, and the best example of it is the story that is passed down, and there's a lot of different versions of it too. Just like they'll say there's different versions of things in the Bible, there's a lot of different versions of things also in ancient Egypt, because we're dealing with a culture of people. People are writing, communicating, seeking to understand and understand things in their time, as we are doing in our times. If I were to write something about my time, right, for people who already know what's going on, I'm not going to talk about what color, was the wall painting, or what the style, the latest song was on the radio or something like that, take a picture of it. No, I'm speaking to the people I'm speaking to. And this is where the scripture, the context, is so very important of the Bible. You see that? I'm already digressing, getting into that other point, a couple of points we want to touch on. The Christ never existed point, right? Where they say black or white, he never existed, right? Okay, we'll wait for us. We're coming, right? Then Moses, right, never existed. Or, that's the next particular point. Or then they turn around for another one, because what they're basically doing is being the devil's advocate, is that the Bible was plagiarized from ancient Egypt. Now, see, the only fault in this argument is when you know the identity of the people of the Bible, you are actually slandering your own ancestors. People like yourself. Somebody can say, listen, a lot of the information you've had to kind of, what they call it, reverse engineer, so to speak, from what the Europeans have put out there. You see, they want to dismiss Africa. You put Africa the center again. They want to dismiss this or that. You put that there in your own writings, in your own lectures, in your own debates, so forth and so on. But let's touch on the story of Isis and Horus, right? Isis, Horus, and Osiris. Now, actually, Harui, even the word Harui or Haru, some say Haru, but Harui, right, is an Ethiopic word. That means that it's actually a title. It can be a name, but it can also be, and we find it in the scriptures to also refer to a title. And guess what the title means? Well, you don't have to guess. I'll tell you. The title means the elect. The title means the chosen, right? The chosen one, the elect. So imagine if you was reading an Ethiopic Bible, right? And wherever you came across where it talks about we are the elect ones, it's like saying in the Meduneter that we are the Shemsu Harui or the Shemsu Hor, which is we are the followers, the disciples of Horus, but in the Ge'ez, it's the Haruyana. In fact, in the first line in the Ethiopic, right? And you can find the Ethiopic if you want to study the source materials for yourself. A lot of folks want to say, this is not a primary source, right? As though they got the primary source. I mean, have you gone and studied the papyruses they have in the museums? Have you gone there and studied it with your crew of scholars and say, we want to make sure that we want to date it ourselves and we want to touch it and feel it? Have you? No, the nearest you've gotten to anything is probably through the glass, and then you've gotten some books. So don't pretend and act like we got to go and bring the ancient manuscript or a picture of it and have it. Don't be stupid. That is foolish and that is stupid right there, right? So let's be truthful. Isn't it about the truth? You shall know the truth and the truth shall set you free. So the truth about the origin of the ancient Kamite or ancient Egyptian or the Mitzrayim civilization is from the Tob but we'll call it by the name that we know it today as Ethiopia. In other words, let's see if we can move this down right here. You see this right here. So basically right here is where we have Egypt. Now this just says Morocco Arabic. It's talking about different languages, different directions right there. We don't have any place names right here, but this right here is Ethiopia. This is the Ethiopia region, or what would have been known in ancient times, right, as the Kui land, the God land, the Kui land. This is where the gods came from, right? And let's show you a map right here. You might be able to see it a little bit better, right, in this map right here and in this presentation right here. So we zoom in right here. So we have the Nile River Valley. So the ancient Egyptians, even in the pre-dynastic, what they call the pre-dynastic texts, right, and the pre-dynastic evidence, right? The evidence is found in different kind of places, but pulling all of that together, they said that the beginning of their civilization was when Osar and Oset, or when Osiris, as he's called in the Platonic Greek, and Isis, or Isis, right, when they traveled from the Tob, or the Ethiopian, the highland, or the Godland, they traveled down the Nile, right, to what we know today as Egypt, and what the scholars called ancient Egypt, and many of y'all would like to call Kemet, right? They traveled down the Nile, and what was their mission? What was the mission down the Nile? Do any of you know what their mission was? Right? Their mission, this is before Horus or Harui, right, was born, right? Also in the Goodness text, you'll find that Yeshua, Jesus Christos, is the Harui. So you see how all this basically comes out of Africa. It's almost like a cipher. It came out, going through the whole world, right? And then it's coming forward again. It's returning, right? So their mission, Osar and Oset, was to civilize. It was a civilizing mission. In fact, this is kind of good, even though it should be more inland, right? Some say it was further inland. Well, all we can be sure is that the description by the ancient Egyptians of that God land, right, and the direction, it actually fits what we know today as the Horn of Africa, right? Ethiopia, Uganda, Kenya, all those countries right there, with the Ethiopian highland being a center of where Osar and Oset came from on their mission to civilize, right? To civilize and terraform and do all other sort of civilization works, to build a civilization there. Because the people that were there, and they were black peoples, right? They were black peoples now. They were melanated peoples there, were living uncivilized. How come they haven't told us that half of the story, right? You know, they'll say there was never a time when we had to be civilized. But right here, we have from ancient Egypt a story of one set of black people, right, who happens to be Ethiopian. So Osar and Oset were Ethiopians, right? They were ancient Ethiopians, or more correctly, Tobians, right? Or Tob people. Tov in Hebrew means good, and Tobia is the good Yah, or the good I am. You know, when Yah said to Moses, I am that I am, Ehyeh, Asher Ehyeh, right? I am. So we have Ehyeh, Yah, Ehyeh, or some say Ahya, Asher Ahya. There's a debate on about what was the true pronunciation of it. So let's go with Ahya, because that's where we get Yah from. So we have Tob Yah, the good I am, or interpretively speaking, the good Jah, or the good Yah. And this connects once again with Osar, right? And what's also important is that the majority of the primary Christian themes, or themes that later on will become known as Christian, can be traced to Egypt and to the very root in Tobia, or Ethiopia, right? So we really have to break the language barrier. It's like the sound barrier, right? It's like the sound barrier to go faster than sound, right? You remember when the white man, the European, the Goy wanted to go faster than sound, and he wanted to go faster than light. Well, for the Afrocentric, the consciousness, the Kemetans, the ancient Egyptian, the dress up, whatever, if you're about the truth, you have to break that language, that linguistic barrier, because that's what Osar and Osset had to do as well. They had to teach them language. And this is one of the reasons why in ancient Egypt, right, the hieroglyphs, what's known as the hieroglyphs, the Metuneter, right, were only known amongst the educated classes. And in ancient Obia or ancient Ethiopia, they used the hieroglyphs, the basic hieroglyphs, like graffiti. It was like child's play. And you know who had actually told us that? It's I, brother, who I don't hear your talk about him enough, even though we may disagree on certain points here or there, but is an excellent scholar who has done something that many have not really given due credit for. And we're speaking about Ra'un Nefer Amen, when he came up to Brooklyn College back in 1992, 93, sometime around thereabouts, or it might have been 91, actually. I have to check up on that. But when he came up to at the Black History Month, right, and Leonard Jeffries as well, they were invited, by Lion of Judah, the academic club, not the society it is now, but the fraternity and the sorority, the Ethiopic frat. Let's just make that clear. We don't go Greek. We don't do Greek. You understand? We're not Greek. Right? We're not boulets. You know what I mean? Even from that time, we knew something was wrong. So we started our own the first Ethiopic letter frat. At the same time, there was the first what they call it? What was it? Haru Neset Ra. Haru Neset Ra. I think Haru Neset HNR, if I'm correct, which was the first, Kemet, right? The first Kemet frat and sorority too, at the very same time. So around this time, right around the year of the creation, the 100th centenary of His Divine Majesty, was both first Ethiopic letter fraternity and sorority at BC, Brooklyn College, as well as the first ancient Egyptian or Kemet letter fraternity and sorority. And so we all came together to bring various different scholars that were out there, even Ivan von Sertima. God bless his soul, because I think I've heard that he's gone on to be with the ancestors, as it were, to the spirit world. But even him and his lovely wife came forward and presented their books and their reasoning, so forth and so on. This is 1990 something. Let's just point that out. So I just want to give you a little bit of context to this, because without the proper context, all this debating and, who wrote the Bible? How come this is in it? How come that's not in it? How come you haven't studied it even in the Masoretic Hebrew? Oh, because that's not our language. You see, your cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance. So the story that the ancient Egyptians give us is what? What is the story of origins of ancient Egypt that we are given by the ancient Egyptians or the Kemites themselves? What is the story that they give us? Well, according to the story that they give us, Isis or Osar and Osset, right? They traveled down the Nile, following the natural flow from the Ethiopian highlands. After all, that rich Kamwer, that rich black soil, that perfect black. Remember, Asar was called what? The Lord, right? The Kamwer, right? The Lord of the perfect black, right? And part of that was also connected with that rich Ethiopian and Obian floodwater inundation topsoil that came down the Nile after the rains, right? And it's interesting when the rains, when that time was, because that's the very same Earth Day as Haile Selassie I, the same birthday as the Son of Man, Lij Teferi, July 23rd. those of y'all who know, that's all connected with the dog star and Leo, and how Leo is connected with the Sphinx, or the Hor in Akhet, right? If you know it as that, right? And that whole figuration and arrangement. One thing is interesting. What is the plateau called? The plateau is called the Giza, right? The Giza, right? Isn't it called the Giza? Isn't it interesting that the ancient Obians or the ancient Ethiopians called themselves the Agazi? They call themselves the Giz, right? People, or the Behera Agazi, right? Or the Agazi people. And at the root is the Giz, right? Then we also have Gu'uz. And now Gu'uz is very metaphysical, and we don't even want to go there right now, because Gu'uz means the neuter. Right? It's between dimensions. Let me just put it like that, or moving out of this dimension, right, into other dimensions. But really, it's the between dimensions, right? It's like the meditative mind state, being in the meditation, as it were. But that's part of that word. The word is also defined as the free people, right? The free people. So now if we put this all together, right, both what the ancient Egyptians said of their own beginnings, right? And none of them can dispute that. They disputed, they're liars, and they can't bring you evidence to dispute it, because there's more evidence that basically proves it over and over. This is one thing about the ancients, that what they really believed in, or they admitted, or they amained, they consistently, repeat. It's like us as black folks. You know how we can repeat like part of a Bingy song? It's like a verse or two. We can keep chanting that verse over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. Because if it's true, 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 it's true. You see what I'm saying? And this part of the origins has been continually regurgitated, so to speak. So you need to chew the cud, right, on that particular regurgitation right there. All right. So they came down the Nile, right? Because remember, the Nile actually begins, right? If we can say it has a beginning, it mirrors actually the Milky Way now, but that's a whole different point right there. In the South, the Twa people, the Khoi people, the ancient peoples, the South African people, there's that whole connection right there as well. So they came down the Nile to do what? They came down the Nile to civilize, right? To civilize a people. Now, isn't this kind of very interesting? The whole thing about civilize, right? When I think about the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and yes, I give him that honor, right? Because he knew the black man was God, right? I mean, he didn't identify the black man that was God walking amongst them, but then after all, the people were so out of it, they wouldn't even, be able to connect with that. But, what was I saying about the Honorable Elijah Muhammad for a moment? The whole story about civilizing, how Moses, right, within some of the teachings, right, in the, Nation of Islam, right, some of their particular teachings, spoke about how Moses, right, they say he was half original man. I think that's what they call him, a half original man, right? And that's playing on the English word Semite and semi. Well, actually Shem, right, means in the Ethiopic tongue, it means the name. I mean, this basic meaning is a name. And therefore we have to ask, so what's in a name? But the story they teach, right, which has a kind of a parabolic logic, right? It's like a story to teach something else that has principles in it. It's like a parable, right? It's like a myth, but a myth does not make it wrong. Because see, when you're thinking with the European mind, if I say that, well, the Bible has myths in it. Yes, the Bible does have myths in it. People say, oh, see, I told you it wasn't true. See, they don't recognize that around 1700 and something, what was it, Thomas More, right? Thomas More changed the whole meaning of that word myth. And it was during that time. In fact, even the word utopia was first developed around the 1700s. So that means that when you reverse engineer history, or you try to do that you try to get to the past from here, instead of finding firm points and firm truth, and when you ignore firm evidence, like the Ethiopian testimony is one very, very firm evidence, right? Then you miss the whole point, right? And you basically are going around the same old mountain, right? So the origin of the ancient Ethiopian, well, actually the origin of the ancient Ethiopian civilization basically was God, from God, is God. You understand? But the origin of the ancient Egyptian civilization was from Ethiopia, right? That's the origin of the ancient Egyptian civilization. I want to bring this one in right here. I kind of like this pic right here a little bit. It's a little modern, give a little modern feel to, as ones would call it right there. This whole love story, right, among two Ethiopians. So they were Ethiopians. They were civilizers, which also shows that at that time they were uncivilized black folks. I mean, do we know anything about that? I mean, who ever heard of such a thing? Uncivilized black folks needing some Ethiopians to come over here and civilize? Well, in a sense, we need the consciousness, not just the general black consciousness. We need to define the black, right? And if we're going to say black consciousness is defined by ancient Egypt, ancient Kemet, and if the origin of the ancient Kemetian civilization, according to their own testimonies, right, was from Ethiopia, the Kui, what they call the Kui land or the God land, this would mean that it would be more proper for us to call it Ethiopian or Ethiopic, getting past some of the modern carelessness, right? Ethiopic consciousness, right? Getting into an Ethiopic consciousness. This is why we as Hebrews, only to teach, call ourselves Black Hebrews, Israelites. We are really Ethiopian Hebrews and Israelites. And I know. They say we ain't Ethiopians or Cushites and all of that. Well, how interesting. Ethiopia is both before the flood and it's after the flood. How do you explain that? How do you explain that there are two Enochs, one from the line of Cain, who was born before, the one from the line of Set? Or was that Suit? Or was that Suit on? Anyway, a little bit more to come on this particular point, brothers and sisters. And for the next part that we want to touch on right here, right, is the Haile Selassie Osiris connection. It's really interesting because if you know the real story, right, of Osar, right, and if you look at the Isis, not to be his personal wife, but the Isis to be the African widow. I'm speaking about Ethiopia is the widow. We are, in a sense, kind of like sons of the widow, but we know who our Abba Father is. When we look at Ethiopia to be, in a sense, or the imperial Ethiopia, the Ethiopia of His Majesty, to be the Oset, right, that bride, right, when we understand it from Ethiopically, right, when we get out of this Gentile, white, Western, right, mentality. We'll touch on that, Yah willing, to come. Shalom, Ras Teferi.